Things just took a fascinating turn for the Minnesota Wild and the Marco Rossi situation as Gary Bettman and the NHL have revealed a new detail that has Bill Guerin and the Minnesota Wild very interested in, with the new tiers for offer sheets being released. This has major implications on Marco Rossi's future with the Wild, not only in terms of a trade, but in terms of other teams offer sheeting him. And hey, maybe if the Wild could ever offer sheet someone else in the future. We got to dive into what the NHL released and why it's important. But we also have a little note on Liam Ohgren, and one website gave some season grades, and we got to give some credit where credit is due. A lot of fun stuff coming up on this episode of Wild Digest. Before we get into it though, guys, we have a huge goal. First of all, thank you for supporting us like crazy. This channel has taken off, and that's thanks to you, but still 86% of you are not subscribed. We have a goal of 2,000 subscribers by the end of May. We're just over 2 weeks away. Hey, we came this far thanks to you. We can get there, so thank you so much for watching. Let's dive right into it, and I want to start with Liam Ohgren here. Look, as we know, Liam Ohgren didn't get a ton of time on this team this year, but he's one of our young guys, and he's looking to get that solid roster spot heading into next year. And just to recap kind of what happened this year, of course, he played 4 games last year with 1 goal, 1 assist, and in 24 games this year, he didn't really light the world on fire. I mean, let's be honest, 5 points in 24 games is nothing too crazy. In fact, like, you know, we maybe wished he would have done something a little bit better, but the 6-foot winger from Sweden is like, man, what he did in Iowa was crazy. And I'm just saying there were some similarities to Marco Rossi's development in that he would absolutely dominate in Iowa. But then when he first came up with the Wild, it took him a little bit to get used to the physicality of the NHL. And, you know, Rossi was still, you know, on his road to like being the player he was today. And that's kind of the same thing that we're going to see with Liam Ohgren. Again, Rossi was smaller. Ohgren's not massive, but he's big enough. But you could see as the season went on, he started to get a better and better feel for it. And I am very, very excited for Liam Ohgren. And the Hockey Writers actually did a recent piece that I will link down below because I recommend you go check it out. It was a cool piece giving some grades for Hinostroza and Ohgren. But I took a particular interest in Liam Ohgren because he's one of my favorite young players on the Wild. I mean, look, there's other guys too, but he's just one of these guys I really love to love, if that makes sense. But if we bring up here what they had to say, they said, look, Ohgren wasn't given enough time to acclimate to the roster, but he adjusted as quickly as possible. It wasn't any higher because any higher, they gave him a B+. I probably should have included that, but yeah, they gave him a B+. There's your context. It wasn't any higher because he has so much potential and still makes some mistakes to improve. However, it wasn't lower because he did do well for being so young and playing without showing any nerves. And I think that's a really good point when it comes to Ohgren. When he was on the ice, I felt pretty confident that he was going to make the right play. Were there some mistakes? Yeah, absolutely. But overall, he looked like a very mature player on the ice with the rest of the Wild. And as we've seen, young guys coming into the system, it takes them a little while to really click with the way the Minnesota Wild run, the way the NHL works. But Ohgren, of course, coming in with that experience in the SHL, getting 19 points in 26 games in 23-24 before spending the last 3 games with Iowa. He has that pro experience, so playing on a big stage in front of passionate fans like we have here in Minnesota is nothing new to Liam Ohgren. I thought he had a really good year for at least the eye test, you know, if that makes sense. Yeah, the points didn't really come, and there were some things he could improve, but eye test for a 21-year-old winger, I was quite happy with him. I just want to hear your guys' thoughts on Liam Ohgren as well. Share them down below, but we got to get into some more important stuff. Now, look, if you've been following the NHL, you may have realized today that the NHL released their new tiers for offer sheeting. And if you're not familiar with offer sheeting, maybe some of you aren't, right? A lot of you probably are. But look, offer sheeting is when you have a restricted free agent. Another team can come in and offer them a contract. If they sign it, hey, Minnesota will get a chance to match it. But, you know, if they don't sign it, you know, you have to give up picks, right? So there's some tough things there. So, for example, Marco Rossi signs an offer sheet with another team. Depending on the amount of money, if Minnesota doesn't match it, there's some compensation going the other way. So we have to dive into this here now. And the recent tiers just got released. And there's a very interesting quirk about this that I want to discuss. So, you know, again, depending on the amount of money, for example, if the offer sheet AAV is between 1.5 and 2.34 million, the compensation is a 3rd round pick, right? So again, it kind of incentivizes teams to keep their players, right? Because if they just let him go, that other team will have to pay, right? Let's say, I mean, I don't know, say Montreal, for example, offer sheets Marco Rossi, and they give him, let's say, 4.5 million a year. It's going to be higher, but that's just my example. If Minnesota doesn't sign it, Montreal has to pay Minnesota a 2nd round pick. That's how it works. So what I find important here is with Marco Rossi's upcoming contract, I'll actually show you some comparables now coming from different sources. This is from Cap Wages. Their projection is either a 2-year, $4.546 million deal. That's not going to happen. Or a 7-year, $7.4 million deal. That's probably closer to what's going to happen, as we have heard rumors that the Wild have offered Rossi about a 5-year deal in the range of $5 to $5.5 million. That's what the Wild have offered. So we have Rossi, who's probably looking for something more, and this comes from Scotiastat and their recent cards. I'm going to link Scotiastat down below as well. Go check them out on Twitter, follow them. They have links to all these stat graphics as well. Super, super useful. And their projection, which has often turned out to be right, by the way, they project at 5 years, $6.8 million as the most likely contract for Rossi, but there's also a good chance that he'll sign a 6-year deal a bit above that $7 million range. So when we're hearing the Wild are offering around that $5.5 million, and Rossi's not taking it, we can only infer that he's looking for at least $7 million. And when I look at these tiers right here, and I look at the bracket from $4.68 to $7.02 million, the compensation is a first and third round pick. I don't know exactly what the dollar amount was last year, but it was below $7 million for that same tier. But now what this is telling us is if a team gives Marco Rossi, for example, a 6-year or 7-year contract worth $7 million per season, that team will only have to give up a first and a third round pick if the Wild don't match it. And we know right now from experience that the Minnesota Wild, we're not sure if he's going to stick around. Again, I want to reiterate, I want him to stay. You want him to stay. Everyone wants Marco Rossi to stay. All the fans, all this. Except the organization maybe seems like they don't. I'm not going to get into the details on that again. We've talked about that a lot of times. Check out our other videos. But in any case, if an offer sheet is to come through, if Minnesota can't come to an agreement on a trade, or if they decide not to agree on an extension with Marco Rossi, I think a 6 or 7 year by $7 million AAV contract is very reasonable. And I think teams will be trying to sneak in there because if you can offer Rossi away, if he's willing to sign that and you only have to give away a first and a third round pick, you're laughing. Because for Rossi's production, 60 points, 23-year-old young center, he played a lot of 1C this year with Kirill Kaprizov. $7 million, especially with the cap increasing, is going to look absolutely absurd in terms of a contract in just a few years from now. So this might incentivize Minnesota to be on the lookout for a trade. It actually might arguably lower his trade value if that is the range where he's going to extend. And I want to reiterate that multiple sites have his projection in that 6-7 year area at about $7 million. Like here, 6 years, 7.1, or 5 years at 6.8. This one is 7 years at 7.4. The Wild are offering 5 years at about 5 or 5.5, which according to these models is very much below his market value. So if a team can sneak in under that $7.02 million tier, they're incentivized to, right? And trade packages for Rossi, if Bill Guerin wants to go out there and show him on the market, teams would be like, well, and look, I know there's other complications with offer sheets. Like, you're not going to be in the good graces of the Minnesota Wild if you offer sheet Marco Rossi. That's for sure. But I'm just saying, after seeing Broberg and Holloway last year with St. Louis prying them away from Edmonton, it's more likely than ever. We're hearing multiple GMs say, I think offer sheets are going to be more common. And Rossi is one of those prime targets this year, alongside Noah Dobson, alongside some other guys like Mason McTavish. There are some names that could very, very well be sheeted. And I'm just saying, at this point, with that compensation, Rossi might just be one. And honestly, that's pretty big implications on the Minnesota Wild's plan this offseason. But I'd love to hear from you. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw this. What do you think of what I'm saying here? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Does this change anything really on the Rossi front? Do you even think he'll get offer sheeted? That's why you're here. That's why the comment section is so beautiful, to see all of you wonderful people share your opinions. But that'll do it for this episode of Wild Digest. If you enjoyed, hey, just hit subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, just go down and check. And hey, maybe you don't want to subscribe. That's cool. But hopefully you'll see us enough that'll convince you at one point or another. I'm your host, Josh Goss. I'll catch you in the next one.